Okay, cool. Thanks everyone for joining. This is Boston Founders Forum's first event of 2025. And we wanted to make it a special one, an AI-focused one. We all understand why, right? That's super interesting times. And we figured what better way to do it than to start with Boston's most unique and exciting AI startup, Blitzy. Okay, so the format of tonight. So I'm gonna allow Brian to introduce himself, but he's a humble guy, and so this is what we do on sales calls too. So I'm gonna do a powerful introduction because I think that's important, but especially for this session. So Brian and Sid, the founders of Blitzy, are remarkable people. Even before Blitzy, the list goes on and on about their talents. They're two of the most impressive people I've met. Sid, he's so impressive that he's locked in coding right now and is unable to be here, which is exactly what we want. And the reason we want that is because we're talking to so many different businesses every single day. Amazing new founders and startups, massive Fortune 500 enterprises, publicly traded companies. And so we're seeing a lot of what's going on, right? And so on top of that, the folks behind all that who are running and creating this amazing company are Brian and Sid. And so they really have incredible visibility and understanding of what's going on in the AI landscape. And really the innovation landscape, the modernization landscape, right? And so I want you guys to be able to take advantage of Brian up here tonight. We're gonna rock and roll with a Q&A session right from the get-go. So fire your questions to him. I've seen Fortune 500 CEOs do the same, and I'm astonished at how much I'm learning every single time. So really take advantage of that tonight, okay? So without further ado, Brian Elliott, CEO and co-founder of Blitzy.
You're welcome. As a quick show of hands, who here is actively building a startup, is an operator in a startup, working on an idea? Most of the audience. Who here in the month of February has been told by somebody, whether a prospect, prospective investor, that what you're working on is not going to work?
Most of us.
Almost
right?
all of you.
Yeah.
So first we'll talk a little bit about where we're at physically, and then we're going to revisit that, and we'll do Q&A. So who, last one, has been in this building before? Amazing. History of this building. So the woven fire hose was invented here over 100 years ago, followed by the bicycle tire. So this one Kendall Square has been a beacon of innovation pretty much for as long as Cambridge has existed. And if we just scope out maybe 100 meters from this location that way, MIT Computer Science Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. If we go 100 meters that way, Moderna solved COVID. If we go 1 mile that way, that's where Facebook was started, right? So all of these huge world-changing accomplishments started from the epicenter here between Kendall Square and Harvard Square. I think what folks maybe don't realize is the Collison brothers of Stripe also came out of here. Drew Houston of Dropbox came right out of there where he built his MVP. And so the question is, here at Boston Founders Forum, why are the Collison brothers, why is Drew Houston in San Francisco when Harvard and MIT and BC and BU and Northeastern are all on my 3-mile run route? It's because Boston for the long time has had all of the talent, but none of the community. If you're around Silicon Valley, there's a magic to what is happening, right? Everywhere you go, it's a completely liquid market of talent and ideas and forums where if you're on a new tool or a new technology or a new agent, you're going to hear about it the same day because people build, they convene, they share, and they build. So that's why spaces like this, where all of us come together, convene, share best practices, and are humble about the struggles that we're having together to build something enduring and great, just like Alchemy and HubSpot right here within 500 meters of this location. Community is how we get from great ideas to great companies in this community. So I'm very grateful that folks decided to come here tonight to spend a few moments to share best practices, to talk about what's working, but also talk about what's not working and how we can overcome that. So I'm very grateful that folks made the decision to invest in themselves, their companies, and the community. So with that being said, quickly on Blitzy, quickly on what I'm happy to talk about, and then quickly on probably what I'm unqualified to talk about so I can avoid those questions. So Blitzy is an autonomous software development platform. So if folks have used GitHub Copilot or folks have used Cursor, you can think of those as kind of really strong autocompletes, right? Where that might make a developer 30%, 40% faster in developing software, which is a miracle, by the way. Unbelievable productivity lift. At Blitzy, we invert the problem. Instead of autocomplete on the back end, we start with a set of technical specifications, and we build over the course of 8 to 12 hours with a huge amount of agents, 80% plus of an enterprise software application, millions of lines of code as is required, and then we provide a guide for the final 20%, for the developers to come in and use the Copilot and finish an application. So we can typically get large-scale enterprise applications built 5 or 6 times faster than what is typical by inverting the model on its head, using a huge amount of compute up front, and then allowing the engineers to do what they are great at, which is the intricate problem solving, the configuration, sort of nuanced issues. And so we are very, very smart on what we call System 2 AI, right? Which is allowing thinking time to occur, allowing problems to be solved at inference. And so happy to jam on that with anybody that wants to talk about it. We are also an AI native company, right? So more than just our platform or our product that empowers the enterprise, every vertical within our company, from Chris as the chief revenue officer to Beth as the head of media, uses AI in their workflow, right? Chris is prospecting somebody right now as he sits here with AI. Beth's video is about to be edited with AI after this. And so we very much believe that the AI native startup will be much leaner, much more profitable, much faster compared to competitors, and allow us to outcompete others. We take that very seriously across other verticals. And then the third thing I'm talking about is I'm a brand new dad. So
yeah. Woo! Literally as of a few days ago.
Yeah, I have an 11-day-old at home, and so I really wanted to be here tonight. So I came here just for this moment, because I think it's that important that we convene as founders and builders. So if anybody else wants to talk about that, we can talk about it afterwards. So those are things I'm qualified to talk about. So with that being said, if anyone, maybe you can start with a primer.
Yeah, exactly. So to Brian's first point in his opening statements, supporting each other and building an actual business is something that's really hard. And it's really interesting and it's really fascinating. The times have changed. The pendulum has shifted all the way because of AI to aggressive AI tools, prospecting. And so now to get attention, you have to market different. You have to build content. You have to do all these different things. So one of the things that would probably be interesting for you folks that's a little bit different than AI is how do you go to market in a world like it is today? The first thing that I was incredibly impressed on about Blitzy and what Brian was doing was his approach to that. So there's some questions there. So why don't we do this? I'm going to give a few folks, if you have initial questions, the opportunity to raise your hand. I'll select some of you, but I'll probably also jump in and help guide the conversation to interesting topics, because I am literally behind the curtain and get to see firsthand what those interesting topics are as I sit here in this office and listen to these folks, okay? So show of hands, who wants to start? Yes?
So if I understand it, you guys build an app, right, based off kind of a really nice project plan?
We build 80% of an app based on a technical specification, yep.
So like Bolt.new is out there, V2, Lovable. How do you position yourself relative to them?
Totally. So a lot of people slice the market in Copilot versus Autopilot. There's another vector of the market that isn't necessarily clear as a sort of consumer looking at it. There's kind of consumerized small applications, think less than 5,000 lines of code, 10,000 lines of code. And there's enterprise scale, think millions of lines of code. The architecture and the approach to build each of those systems is fundamentally different. So we are enterprise first, enterprise focused. And we have to solve problems like how do you get effective unlimited context windows, right? And how do you stitch together context between agents? How do you understand every relationship and dependency within a large scale code base and make sure you account for that when you're building? And then how do you do QA, right? How do you compile before the human has ever seen the line of code? So Cursor, V0, Lovable, amazing applications. Probably one of the best times ever to build an MVP or even sort of a mid-size application. But for the enterprise, we see sometimes 20 million line mono repos. The context there is 5% for something like Lovable, and that's where we kind of really come in and shine.
Okay. In the back. Yes. After that answer, everyone's hands started to raise up.
Relating to this idea of the super lean team getting a lot out of AI in the area of the company, I'm interested in this change, how you think about structuring teams. So like your org chart looks different when you have AI-powered sales, marketing, CS.
Here, let me reiterate the question for those who may not have heard it. So super lean teams. How do you be effective? How do you do well starting a business? By maintaining being super lean. And so how do you use tools to do that? Is essentially the question, right?
Yeah, that's the question. It's a great one, by the way. I'm going to answer this sort of on 3 fronts. So we get asked this question all the time by enterprises when they say, like, what is the new shape of my engineering team, like, as a standalone with a tool like, call it Blitzy plus Cursor or Blitzy plus Codep, which recommend. And that is a fundamental flip of somebody that really understands the strategy, right? Like you have to have the person that understands the business objectives and the outcomes and the customer. That person will never go away. And then you have to have the last mile person, right? And so a lot of that middle gap on the engineering side is going to, I think, people are going to upskill or change or increase their level of abstraction. So that's like what we tell the enterprise. Now, getting down to the startup, right? We very much think that that same methodology that we share with the enterprise applies to our own verticals. So we have somebody kind of in each vertical that deeply understands the business and what we are trying to achieve, but we're not going to scale a really large team underneath that person. And we're building the systems in a way that we get their intent achieved, and then we leverage technology to expand them to deal with more and more and more customer bases. So it changes the way that you think about using the second hire within every vertical, but it doesn't necessarily get rid of the first hire. And the last point on all of this is you have to have an incredibly clear strategy of what you are doing as a business for anything I just said to be true. So this idea of being incredibly thoughtful and documenting that in a way that is crystal clear, because writing drives clarity, enables an organization that is AI native. So we have a living document that gets changed once a quarter, but maybe a 5% change. Like, this is what Blitzy is doing across sales, across marketing, across engineering, across specific technology choices. And it stayed pretty consistent across the entire review of the company, and that's allowed us to be AI native because we were very, very opinionated about what the future looks like.
I'm gonna expand on that too. So, to his point about being really specific. So think about, I know it's a startup, but think about a particular line of business or a function, right? Like marketing. I think marketing is a really important one for startups, right? Like whether you're getting your name and your brand out there, whatever it is. So now think about marketing. What are the top 3 to 4 things that you need to do at this particular point in time? How do you execute those, right? To Brian's point, build that very specific, concise sort of document and plan, and then start to apply what tools can I use to get that done. Think about essentialism. What is most essential, right? How can you cut the FUD away? And then use a basic LLM like GPT. You take that and you say, what are tools that leverage AI that I can use to execute on this in a very productive way while staying lean? Cool. Next question. Yes?
Can I build on that one actually? So as you think of a function where you don't build a team under it, are you supporting it with engineering? And some of these things, like you might have a tool, but they might need some amount of customization or actual technical skills, or is everyone on the team skilled technically to get the job done? How do you think through that? What percentage of your team is engineering? And how do you think about that?
So everyone's an engineer except for Chris.
Yeah,
and
literally.
He's about 6 months away from being an engineer. So if you hang around us long enough, you're going to get pretty technical. And I think it changes the competencies, to your point, Max, on what is expected within an organization and within a role to be successful. Because building something to automate isn't that hard anymore if you have sort of the basics or the fundamentals. And so we very much put the expectation and the onus on that individual vertical owner, if you will. And if they want to hire an engineer, they can, right? And so sales has 2 engineers underneath them. Right now, they're contractors that are helping build some of these systems for them, just to kind of get that automation layer in place, very specific to our processes.
Yeah. Go, yeah.
Yeah, so you currently are doing roughly 80% auto generation. People are generally, just by default, lazy. Like, they'll take the path of least resistance if it's available. So are there requests to get to 90%, 95%, 100%? Like, does it get exponentially more difficult to be getting, like, the last couple percentages?
Yes. So yes to all. So at closing the chasm from 80 to 90, 100, every percent is incrementally harder. That being said, we have a very clear view on how to do that. So in 2025, we're 80%. Next year, we want to be 90%. The path from 90 to 100 is pretty tough. So we're just going to keep all the engineers employed and call 90% a win, I think.
Yeah. We got to be careful about that, right?
Yeah.
We're very grateful we're at 80% and 90%. Otherwise, maybe not all of us would be here. Yes, here, you up front.
So you talk about working with enterprises. Is there a specific type of enterprises you need to be able to engage with in terms of their legacy tech or the way that they're modeled? Like,
Blitzy specifically?
Any enterprise, or what happens if you roll into a insurance company that's got a mainframe in the corner that's still running COBOL? Can you help them?
We love those guys. There's a lot of pain there. And so what I described is sort of the 0 to 1 build process, because it's the easiest thing to describe in an audience, but more than half of our business is these large scale refactors. And so that's folks, insurance companies, for instance, getting onto cloud. They've built this series and series of middleware along the way that they're trying to maintain, and all the COBOL developers are basically dying off. And so they're at the point of no return, and there's this other big event that forces all to be here tonight, which is the adoption of AI. And so their technology stacks are not primed, they're not set up to adopt AI. And so they can come in, they can use a tool like Blitzy, we can understand their code base, create documentation for it, which we were doing for free. We realized we should probably charge for that because people were so excited about perfect documentation for 20 million lines of code. And then do that refactor, not 100%, but 80%. And then that development team then internally sort of finish the final 20% who has the context. And so we love those folks. If you know more of them, send them over.
And here's something really cool. So what's interesting, so a lot of those folks are Fortune 500 companies or publicly traded companies. So that is one of the most important things for the CEO and CTO, right? So how do they stay competitive? To put it into perspective, one of those companies, they would typically, this is a massive project, would go to a company like Deloitte or McKinsey and say, help me. How do I do this? An average sort of quote after an analysis from one of those companies is, okay, we think we can get it done over 10 years and probably for slightly more than $1 billion. Right? So it doesn't happen. And that's why this new approach and leveraging AI in general is super exciting. Because what can it mean? What does it mean for innovation as a whole, right? And the development of businesses as a whole, right? It's exciting times. Who do we have next? Yes.
So I want to piggyback up the first question. So they were asking about they asked about what your niche in the market was. And I want to know how you found that, how you validated it. So
cool.
Sure, as an engineer, you have hundreds, maybe thousands of ideas of things you can build. You have the ability to build. I want to know how you went to the original pitches and how you then decided to when to start building, when to just pitch to people in that whole early stage process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's twofold. One, we had a very clear vision of what we wanted to be, call it 5 years from now. And so the question is, how do you get from 0 to 5 years from now? And as long as you have this, you can be a little bit looser with your market entry point and let the market pull you. And so what we did was sell, right? And so we have yet to build a product that I haven't yet sold. I sold something, that's why Sid's coding right now and not here. It's because I just sold something really big. And we always deliver on time. It just means that Sid has to skip the event sometimes and work over the weekends, but we have yet to miss a delivery. So only through sales can you discover what somebody will actually pay for. And so that's always been our approach, because we could build any number of routes to our ultimate vision, which again has to be super clear. And so we've let the market kind of tell us what is really important and where the willingness to pay is today.
And you know what that allows you to do? It allows you to be way more flexible, right? So if you're going to invest the time and energy and resources into something, you want to be pinpoint and make sure you're going to get an ROI on it, right? So you can take that approach, figure out what the value for that would be, how much that would cost, how much could you charge for it, and then you can get really excited and make really strategic hiring decisions and whatnot, knowing that that's the value you'll gain from that investment.
I have a follow-up on that. So you're talking about what people are willing to pay. So in our case, we're building an AI tech recruiter, and we're thinking about business model, right? So you're saying maybe it's going to be 400 engineers over the course of 5 years, and I'm going to save you all those salaries. Did you think through that in terms of like how you priced your product, or is it really more around outcomes, or how did you even think about the business model behind what you're building? Because it's so disruptive from what's out there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, one second.
Go ahead.
This is like my favorite question that he gets to explain. So we were just on a call with a Fortune, I think 500 company, publicly traded company the other day, and Brian went through a series of questions. It's very similar to your answer. So like, go off on this one.
You want to, I was like, I don't know what I said. I blacked out on that call.
Just think about like all the questions you ask from an OpEx perspective and then revenue impacting perspective and all of those things.
Totally, yeah. So it's a great question. I think it is a question that is fundamentally true in all AI companies just like yours. And so we think about like what is the cost to do this today with no AI. We think about what is the cost to do this today with competitors, and then we just try to deliver ROI ahead of that. But as much as possible, like we want to benchmark ourselves off of what did this cost in 2024, right? And how can we be 1/10 of that cost from a price perspective? So how do you solve a $10 million problem for $1 million and have your cost basis be $100,000? Or you can drop a zero off of it depending on who your market is. But that's really how we think about it, is find $1 million problem for the enterprise and charge it for 1/10 of the price. And we do it based on sort of value-based output. So right now we charge on lines of code as an output. Consumption-based pricing is what we've moved to. And to get a line of code from Blitzy, it's not like getting a line of code from Copilot where it spits it out. You're waiting 12 hours for hundreds of thousands of lines of code. So a massive amount of compute has to go into there to build, compile, validate, cross-reference, right? And so our line of code is very, very valuable because it is correct. And that line of code for an engineer from a total basis is 100 or 1,000x more from a both sort of input, cost, time perspective, and then calendar days that otherwise would have taken to get that. So.
And I'm going to expand upon this just for all the founders and startups out there. The way to do this effectively is to make sure you ask questions. You have to ask questions. So many founders get so excited. Someone expresses interest of what they do. They put all this time in it. It's their baby. This is amazing. Let me take all the time to tell you about how great it is. Well, how do you know if it's something that they're going to be interested in? Maybe your product does 10 things, and only one of those things is what moves the needle and that they'd actually pay for. And when they pay for that, how do you know that they're going to actually want to pay that amount, right? So I've done webinars on this. I encourage you guys to check them out. But what's really important is you take the time to be genuinely curious and you ask questions. Okay, and then what's that mean? Okay, and then what's the impact of that? And how much time do you spend on that? And what's the business impact? So ask a question, ask why, try to understand the business impact. And with that information, build an ROI. Right? Build an ROI. And there's a whole bunch of other ways you can get into this. I've done talks of this, but I think that's really important. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned kind of selling before building. What's kind of like the process behind, I guess, figuring out what the customers really care about? And
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it sort of piggybacks off of what Chris.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What do the customers?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll do that every time. What does the customer really care about? Right? Like, how do you know what the customers care about so you can effectively build something to provide that value or sell it in the first place?
Yeah, I think we look for a top 2 priority. If it's not a top 2 priority, it's easier for the big companies. So that's what I can speak to because we sell most of large enterprises. But their top 2 priorities are in their S1. It's in their quarterly report, and so there's no BSing it, right? And you can just ask them, what is your CTO's top priority? We'll let people pull up emails on calls from the CEO and be like, this is your top priority, right? Is solving this problem. And we say that's a great fit. So it's also saying, great, we're a fit to now ask 10 or 15 or 20 questions to dig deep into why this is a priority and what and how you were trying to solve that. And they're sort of qualified for us to dig in. If this is a exploration area or something that they're personally thinking about, but they're not the one that can pay for it, then you have to really politely get off the call.
Yes.
Because your time is super precious. They're never going to pay for it, and you just have to say Thank you so much. I can absolutely send you information about this. It sounds like in your organization right now, this isn't a top 2 priority, and we as a business can only work with people that are going to give a top 2 priority because we're a really small team. And as soon as this is really important to your organization, in a top 2, I'm so excited to get back on. And so, here's all the information that you can have async on your own time to sort of dig deep and think about this, and I'm here for you to call me. And so a part of it is sort of time management of find people that it is a top 2 for, dig deep in what they want, and then build and sell for those people only.
And I'll add to that. So how do you do that, right? You have an idea, you have a product. We're talking about go sell it first, right? But what if you're not quite ready to sell, right? So you don't quite have the pricing. So look, here's what I would do. If you have an idea, you have a product, you have some sort of legitimate hypothesis, right? What I would recommend is find out who your key stakeholders are. Who are the people that would buy? Right? Everyone has egos. People love startups. They love to help build. You reach out to them. You don't sell. You don't do anything. You say, this is what I'm doing. I'm building a unique startup. I want your advice, your mentorship. I'm going to build out a customer advisory board. You are an expert in this position. I would love to get your feedback. No sales, no strings attached. You do that. You turn it into a little bit of a community. You hold monthly events. Maybe you get them to network and talk with each other. You facilitate that. That's your funnel. And then you can start to ask those other questions. Cool. Yes?
Kind of taking back on that question, right? You kind of mentioned about delivery on time. Just to piggyback off of that question, right? You kind of mentioned about delivery on time and as promised, right? How important is that for startup reputationally? And how do you balance that with, say, limited resources, limited capacity, not enough employees, right? And how do you balance that?
Oh, good question. I'm going to let Brian answer this, but this is so important because me, the sales guy, was like, we have to set the right expectations with the customers. But that's thinking too much. Like when you're a startup, you also have to prioritize you. Like Brian said, you have to prioritize your time, and you gave me a great response to that the other day.
Yeah, so part of it is, it helps to be an engineer, right? And so, if you're on the call, you actually know what you can build in a certain amount of time, and you can sort of take ownership of that. And it's setting expectations that this is really important to you. What you're describing would be bespoke for our offering. So this is something that we can deliver to you in 30 or 45 days. So by the time we're even through the sales process and work with procurement, we can do this bespoke integration. But I want to set expectations up front, even in the first call I do this, that what you're describing is on our roadmap. I will pull it up for you if this is important to you, and rearrange our engineering as long as we're all aligned here, right? And sort of like setting expectations on what those time horizons are, sort of having the technical acumen to know that like what you're saying is correct, even if you have to burn the midnight oil to make it be true, I think is an incredible superpower. I think it's like why taking ownership of being technical, even if you didn't have a computer science degree from MIT, of which I do not, right? Like, but you take ownership of learning, understanding, and building is like such a superpower.
Awesome. Yes?
So, talk about being a native AI company yourself, which means you're kind of small and unique. So what does that mean for two sides? Innovation in your company, and then on the client side, implementation. Are you just trying this thing over the wall?
Sure.
What happens?
So being a native AI company, but a small company, what does that mean essentially internally, right? And then what does it mean for implementation externally?
So internally, you're asking about innovation. So the reason large organizations often, I believe, are not innovating is the cost of communication is so high across these big orgs, and the cost of risk is so high. So by being AI native, you sort of get this innovation coefficient, if you will, where it's much, much easier to build quickly because the cost of communication is drastically lower, and thus the innovation is able to spin. So that's why we sort of we want to have a really, really high revenue per employee, even as a large company, because we get to keep that sort of innovation internally. As we think about what does it mean to onboard enterprise customers, Nick here does that for us, and so we think about like how can we make one Nick 10 Nicks, right? Like how can we give him the tools to be exceptional, to be responsive, to be on top of implementation from a technology perspective. And so it's not about not being there for the customer, it's about building technology so that you are always there and never constrained by the human, but sort of designed from day one to be a company that is great at implementation. So that's kind of how we think about it. You can throw bodies at it, or you can throw technology at it, but whatever you do at the beginning is sort of like how we believe we will scale. It's a great question.
That is a great question. I'm going to throw a question out, Brian. So one of the things that I thought was so amazing with Blitzy is that all while they were building, they were doing a fantastic job with marketing. And I said at the beginning and earlier in this discussion, like cold calls, cold emails, it's kind of dead right now, right? AI kind of ruined that for us. We don't consume information that way anymore. We watch stuff, we like videos, right? Social media has kind of changed us all a little bit, but it's not just for the bad stuff. YouTube University is fantastic. And so Brian, how did you, when building Blitzy, how did you approach marketing? Because you did it so extraordinarily, and I thought it's just an incredible case study for all the other founders out there.
You know, Chris, there's this paper, it's titled Attention is All You Need, and I thought it was a marketing paper. It's like a really niche LLM joke. So if you believe the future is AI first, agentic first, right, you're gonna be able to do huge batches of work with AI, then the fundamental question is, where does human attention go? And it is not to the things that you can automate, because humans fundamentally want something that is unique to them, that is differentiated from the market. And so we thought, what is the one thing that is going to be the last thing to be totally automated agentically? And we thought it was like video first, human to human content and community. And so I don't know when we're going to automate that with AI, but probably not in the lifespan of this company. And sure, you can use tools like HeyGen to sort of make avatars and things like that, but truly authentic, real, raw, video-first content will stand out for a long, long time. And so we started making video kind of as soon as we started the company, you know, basically right with signing our first customer, because we knew it was sort of AI-proof. And everything else was going to have an arbitrage moment, right? You're going to be able to warm up 20 domains, you're going to be able to send out 10,000 emails, and that's going to work awesome for 3 months. And then no one's going to answer those emails anymore. You're going to be able to create your avatar, you're going to be able to send out personalized Loom videos, and that's going to work awesome for 3 months. But me and Chris and Nick and Beth, we really, really care that the enterprise is informed on an AI native enterprise software development lifecycle. We think about it, we talk about it, and then every once in a while we turn a video on and we just capture what we're already talking about. And we found that to be real and engaging and capture the attention of the enterprise in a way that I think a lot of other folks think, what is this gimmick? Or what is this tool that I can get a flash in the pan moment? When the real question is, how do I get on the same side of the table with the person that I'm trying to actually service and sell and create something that they genuinely want to engage with? And so that's been our approach. It's been way more fun, I think, than trying to send out 1 million emails. And so I think anybody else that wants to make video content, we shoot it in here and come shoot an interview with me.
Yeah, seriously. One sec, Kyle. We believe in this so much, and I'll tell you, the results are incredible. I mean, we have 150,000 followers on YouTube right now? Yeah, it's amazing. Our LinkedIn profile is blowing up. So folks, this is on the job description. This is a KPI. So Brian and I were hiring folks to build out our team of consultants, and Brian sent me a document like time management, Blitzy tactics, what do you have to do in this role? And we literally carve out a percentage of time to create content. Everyone should be doing that. If you want to get your message out there, you can still differentiate yourself by doing that, right? The creator economy is blowing up, but it's literally just a fraction. There is plenty of real estate out there in the form of content. So really think creatively of what you can do. Now, the best part is, you don't have to be too creative. Just do it. You have an inspiration, you have a call with a friend, a meeting, something that gets the juices flowing. Maybe you get a little flow state going. Beth teaches me this all the time. She's helping me do this. Same with Brian. Take out your phone and do a 20-second chat with yourself. This is really cool. Da-da-da-da. Start doing that, right? That is effective, and it's a great way to start. Okay, next. We have, by the way, Brian has a newborn baby, as we know. So I'm going to keep him around for 10 more minutes, unless you say otherwise. I'll hang out and still do some questions, and then we can all chat amongst each other too, okay? Yes, in the back.
So I have a startup, and as a ticketing company, we compete with Ticketmaster. In fact, this week, we will pre-sale with the boxing event from So, just like, I'm trying to figure out if you have like tips or roadmaps, how can I get the engineers who've been working on the project, for 3-4 years in their own way, and it's a big system.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. Oh, sorry.
How do you do that?
Yeah. What is the prompt for your human engineers that you can give as a founder? So, startup, you have engineers. You as a founder, you've come to this event. We need to get involved in AI. This is amazing. You have your engineers. They're locked in. They've been using some tools, but the same reason Blitzy's here, not all of them are really great at building things. So how do you take advantage of the tools out there? But how do you get your engineering team to really embrace it? Brian.
So if you already have a team, we'll talk about that in a second. I would say at the precipice, hiring people that are AI native and AI curious and already adopting AI in their workflows is sort of the way to solve the problem on the front end as we bring folks on. And so you'll probably do that in all your future hires. But we have the same conversation with enterprises that have huge teams, and they're saying, how do we get? We're often in market with it's Blitzy plus Cursor as a common package. Like we don't even get enough Cursor usage, right, in their company. And so you are asking your engineers to learn a new skill. And with Cursor, it's prompt engineering. With Blitzy, it's not, because we write the tech spec for you, but let's say Cursor, for instance, you have to acknowledge, like, what I am asking you to do is different than what you already do. And I'm okay with you being slower for 1 week to be faster every week after that, right? But my expectation is that you work to adopt this tool because today is the worst this tool will ever be right now. You might have a little bit of frustration, and I know Cursor doesn't have enough context to really understand a code base. You can just use Blitzy, it's fine. But these tools get exponentially better, and they ride the wave of all the model providers that have just billions of dollars getting pumped into them. So L3 Mini comes out, everything's better, right? And so it's about having a sort of expectation that even though they might be frustrated, if they don't do it, they're going to get left behind. And it's sort of in their best interest to use this moment in your company to get really competent at using these tools, because the alternative path in 2026 isn't there. And so you're doing it because you care about your company, but you're also doing it because you care about that developer.
Yeah, great question. Kyle, you had a question.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
So you mentioned today is the worst the tool will ever be. So every company has had, like the Apples and the Amazon, have their near-death experience of a company. Like how, with the evolution of AI, how will you prepare for that?
Oh, good question.
Existential.
Yeah.
You want to repeat it so folks can hear?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So every business has their near-death experience, right? And with the adoption of AI, that's a real reality for lots of people too. And so how does Blitzy think about that? Now, part of the reason I'm at this company is because I know the answer to that, which is really cool, but I'll allow Brian to share it.
So there's two ways to build an AI company. You can build an AI company assuming that the models are going to get incrementally better or exponentially better, right? And there's a whole dearth of startups that bet incremental over the past 24 months that are now dead because all the model providers have just steamrolled over the top of them. So we build a company, we say open sales, right? We say if the models get better, they get 10x better, Blitzy gets 100x better, right? But if the models don't improve at all, we have a really, really strong value prop today. Our bet is the models are going to get better. That's how we're going to get to 90% and 95%. We're going to ride the wave. We'll eventually distill our own models. But you want to build something where you're so excited for the provider to have that API access available, where you're like pounding on Mike Krieger's door at Claude and be like, give me early access, dude. Like, come on. And he's like, I'm the founder of Instagram. I don't know who you are. But like whatever it takes to get early access to the models and to use those to make your company better, right, is a winning strategy, in my opinion.
That's great. So we have maybe one or two more questions, depending how quick for Brian. So I'll go to you in the back, and then I'll go to you.
So for all your customers, and you're basically on the leading edge, right, of AI-enabled development, how many of your customers, whether they're like refactoring their existing services or building new products, how many are kind of deprioritizing the web interface, the app interface, and doing more for the conversational?
That's a great question.
Like, I don't want to log into my bank account and be like, what's my account? I just want to say, what's my balance? Do I have money for this?
Oh, great question.
How
So,
many are doing that?
yeah. So you think of like the traditional way you access businesses and software. You log in, you go, you click through, you get to the thing you want to do. With the rise of AI, like I don't know how many people are using Siri, just asking questions. Or I use GPT, I just talk into it, right? And so the way we want to get information and how we use businesses in the future is going to be that. So how many businesses are actually thinking about the conversational business model and how that changes, and not so much thinking about their application, UI, and the journey, but more about how you set up this business to be conversational and give answers and information rapidly?
I would say all the customers are thinking about it, very few are acting on it. And so they very much look at that as like their act 2 in their AI adoption. So act 1 is get the tool providers, supercharge the team, increase our margin basis, and then act 2 is infuse this into our own product, into our own offering, which is an act of total reinvention. It requires full board alignment, full C-suite alignment. And so I think they're dipping their toes in the water with an AI native approach to all of their verticals. And if they're doing that, they're in the top 10% of companies, I would say. And if they're doing that, they're thinking about it, they're asking those questions, they're using us as thought partners to say, like, what would you do if you were to reinvent this from the ground up? But very few are leaping into that transition at the beginning of 2025, which means there's still a lot of ripe opportunity in every industry to create this sort of AI native, agent first, maybe chat first. I'm not sure if that's the modality for every vertical. For some of them, sure. Opportunity for companies here in Boston.
Good. And then our last question for Brian.
So enterprise software systems are highly dynamic, right? Like business domains evolve, new services need to be integrated, dependencies need to be updated. In addition to all of that, you also have your models that are generating all this code, improving all the time. So what does the longer term relationship with your customer look like in terms of those two aspects? Like your improvements that they might, like we got our code generated last year and now you have this new model that would have made it even better, right? Like how do you roll that out and how do you deal with the dynamic aspects?
Yeah, so
will you summarize that question too?
Yeah, so the question is, and it maybe said differently, tell me if I got this right, Mark. How do you deal with what looks like a tension between a very dynamic, maybe microservices and shifting business logic environment of the enterprise, which I think accurately characterizes it, and a tool that is generating maybe lots of code and doing it in maybe a bulk build status? Is that a fair summarization? Yeah, so Blitzy is a continuous use asset for that company. So once they bring Blitzy in, it stays there. And so we will graph their code base, understand all of it, and the second that a human changes that code base, they can update Blitzy, and we again re-understand that new addition. And so they can refactor their code base 1 week, they can add features on top of that code base the next week, all in a continuous state fashion, and the underlying system associated with that enterprise continues to update based on what the enterprise is doing. So it is truly like an enterprise continuous update system. It sits between like, what are you trying to build, your spec requirements, which are often come in the form of tickets for new things like that. The first portion of labor is Blitzy, and the second portion of labor is engineers.
Great. All right, you can go quick. I know you were begging for it.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be good.
So a lot of times what we see with startups is that from a regulatory standpoint, right, we see that since they sometimes too small to detect, they tend to avoid or not pay attention to what are the regulatory requirements or what is the regulatory environment that they are supposed to operate in, for example, right? And then we see that as they get bigger, right, they now run into sometimes potentially existential problems, right, with regulation, right? And that has an existential threat to their business model, right? For you as a co-founder or founder of a startup, right? What is your approach to regulation, right? If there is any, right? What is your approach to it, right? And how important do you think, right, paying attention to regulation, to the regulatory environment from the beginning or from the growth of the startup is, or is it as important as when you grow big? Thank you.
Fortunately, we're not experiencing many regulations around the software development industry, so I'll maybe take a stab at approaching it more broadly, because I think the point is an important one. And the fundamental question, if I can do my best to restate it, is do you care about regulation now or later? And is it wrong to maybe ignore regulation now to sort of survive, right? And I think it's a personal response, right? And so I went to West Point. I'm very much like a values-first person. Those values might not line up with what the regulation says. So you have to decide, right? Is what I'm doing right? Do I believe that it is right? And if it is held against me for breaking this rule, am I okay to stomach that, right? Like, if those two things are true, build away, right? Like, if you think like I'm breaking the regulation and I think it's wrong, but I'm justifying it to keep my startup alive, like, I would have more trouble personally, because it isn't values aligned to who you are. And so I think ultimately, like, a company is an expression of who you are as an individual brought out into the world through basically service delivery. And so you want that to be as pure and as real as it can be to you. And if that is against regulation, then that's okay. That's my personal opinion.
Great answer. All right, let's give a round of applause for Brian. Thank you so much.